And yes, my name is Chris Emma. I'm a 6'3", 225-pound senior solutions engineer at Embrace. And I have the privilege of being able to speak with e-commerce customers basically every day and get to hear and learn from them, what are some of their pain points in their current tooling, what they consider their utopia state from a software perspective, and also some of their personal and career aspirations. So today, we're going to take a closer look at the mobile ecosystem of e-commerce organizations and present ways in which those organizations can optimize not only the what is happening, but the why it's happening, so that we can quickly isolate and remediate the issue prior to it leading to a large event affecting a much larger user base. So why are we here? If you work in e-commerce, you know the revenue potential of mobile to your business. Increasingly, the single easiest way to engage with customers is through mobile apps. And whether it's an ad that drives an install to take advantage of a great promotion, or a push notification, or email that gets them one tap away from a purchase, there's never really been a faster way to connect users and driving purchases. However, there is a large gap between the type of experiences customers want and expect through their mobile apps and what businesses are frequently able to deliver. It's simply not enough to monitor crashes as the end-all be-all of app health. And businesses are realizing that they need visibility across their entire user experience so they can quickly take action if apps are broken, failing to deliver value, or just slowing down, causing frustrating user experiences. It's not enough to know what to look for. You need a proactive approach to uncover every opportunity to deliver better experiences that drive higher conversions. In this webinar, we'll cover how a mobile-first approach to observability is crucial for making the best decision that ultimately drives the most revenue. In our agenda, we have 4 main points here, and I'll just quickly go through them. The first is how to surface the largest revenue impacting issue, and not just crashes and errors. How to proactively monitor key metrics to prevent churn and failed purchases. How to spot where your app falls short compared to key industry performance benchmarks, and how to leverage complete mobile data set to answer any business question. All right, our first main topic here, how to surface the largest revenue impacting issues. And again, not just crashes and errors. So first off, everyone knows this, but mobile is a minefield, right? You cannot be prepared for every variable. Unexpected situations will happen that can have outsized impact on your users and business. So what can you do to protect your business from them? And here are some gaps that we see in mobile monitoring. And when we talk to mobile companies, they tell us prior to Embrace, they're using monitoring tools that require you to log for known issues. But when something occurs that they hadn't planned for or logged for, we typically lack the visibility into how it happened, and we are getting back to a guessing game to try to resolve that particular issue. As it relates to visual replay tools, there are a couple of things that customers tell us here. And the first is that visual replays can affect the user experience within the app at some point. And the second is that you don't really see anything under the hood because the same UI issue can stem from an endless number of root causes. So you're really missing that technical truth of the root cause. And again, you typically have to know where the issue is occurring to capture it. And lastly, if there are client-side network failures, the backend could be blind to it. So if you rely on backend systems to track the health and latency of your high-value endpoints, your team won't truly understand performance from the user's perspective. With mobile apps being increasingly complex and dynamic, tracking down issues requires complete context into what's going on in the user's device and not really in your backend. All right, so gap number 1, no visibility into known issues. So the more signals you monitor, the better equipped you typically are to proactively spot regressions. So a couple of things to think about. How do you know the impact of an issue if you're not looking for it? For example, how many people here know the number of users that never make it past the startup screen? Next is how many users abandon your mobile app because it's running too slowly due to redundant network calls? So do you know how efficient your app is with fetching data? Is there a backend optimization? Do you know how many network calls your third-party SDKs are calling? Are they sending and loading too much data? Next is how many users abandon your app because it keeps freezing. right? And good connectivity is never guaranteed. Do you have a way to be notified if your users don't have the best connection? Do you have a way to tell which parts of the app are freezing most often? And what is the outcome to your users? And how many users are banned in your mobile app because they cannot use it due to just the app being broken or missing data, right? So users won't buy products if they can't view the details, whether it's images or prices not showing up. You need a way to determine if a user is getting all the appropriate information they need to make that purchase. In other words, if you want to go from any user action immediately to the root cause of it, your team will have to instrument 1,000 logs, right? Adding logs once you hear about an issue is a reactive response, which means you are constantly firefighting as opposed to preventing fires in the first place. And gap number 2, no visibility into technical truth. So monitoring aggregate user behavior is not enough because mobile has too many variables. There could be specific devices, OS, connectivity, app version, and location conditions that cause issues. Without a way to surface insight, it's an endless guessing game to track down root causes. So a few questions just to think about here. When a user drops out of your purchase funnel, how can your mobile team currently investigate why it happened? What if there's no error to actually inspect? And what if the app is just running slowly? And gap number 3, no visibility into client-side context. So mobile apps are no longer thin clients that just fetch data and display a nice UI. They're highly interactive, they're engaging, they're dynamic. So when you must differentiate based on the performance of your app, you really have to understand what the actual user experience is. And that means observing the full user sessions, and that includes client-side networking. And now mobile observability is greater than monitoring. So having a solution that provides mobile observability means you can go from any negative metric or outcome directly to the root cause. When your product team spots a drop-off at a key part of your funnel, you need the ability to dive in and investigate the full details of that user's experience, whether it's slow loading screens or missing data such as images failing to load. And the same goes for abandoned carts. You want to know whether the issue is a technical failure, such as a problem with the payment provider, or a problem completing purchases due to slow endpoints, or a state mismatch between the client and your backend. For example, no inventory available for that particular product. And for user complaints, you want a predictable way to dive in and see if the problem is in your app versus a user error. If the problem is in your app, you want to know how big the impact is across your user base and whether it's worth prioritizing. If users can't make purchases due to constant app freezes, well, then you want your team empowered to resolve that issue as quickly as possible. And here are some key ways to protect your mobile app. And the first is eliminate the guesswork. If your team spends too much time tracking down issues, it's usually because they need better or more context around that issue. It's not uncommon for mobile engineering teams to spend upwards of 2 days a week fixing issues. And that's 40% of their time that could be spent building features and creating a more competitive app. And the next is audit workflows. So how many tools does your mobile team use today? Are they building visibility by stitching multiple data sources together and maintaining those connections instead of using something more comprehensive? And what optimizations can you make to simplify onboarding and bolster the reliability of your data? And go real time. While new versions require an App Store approval process, mitigating the impact of some issues comes down to response time. With feature flags, remote configs, phased rollouts, the only restriction comes from how quickly your team can learn about an issue. If your mobile team cannot act in real time, and we have to wait hours or days, you will always be on the back foot of those problems. All right, next is how to proactively monitor key metrics to prevent churn and failed purchases. And we have 3 types of metrics here. And these are probably going to look pretty familiar, but in this section, we'll cover why it's vital to have visibility into everywhere your mobile app can lead to negative user experiences. That way you can understand where you have gaps that are costing you users and potentially revenue. And everyone probably recognizes the first 2, but understanding user outcomes like users abandoning the app at a high value area within the app, and understanding the impact and if that high value area is within a checkout or payment or subscribe workflow. And so we're going to cover performance, stability, and user outcome. And number one is performance. So a couple questions I like to put out here for you just to think about. But which of your first-party endpoints takes the longest to resolve in your mobile apps? So again, if you rely on backend monitoring, you aren't usually getting the full picture. Network calls that resolve quickly in your backend can run into bottlenecks when competing with many first and third-party calls within your mobile apps. So if you don't measure networking client side, you'll miss a host of problems that occur when calls either don't make it to your backend or that struggle when a user is trying to use your mobile app on, let's say, a bus or a train that has limited connectivity. And the next is, which of your vendors are failing or blocking your users from being able to interact, right? And everyone knows this, ad SDKs are frequently the worst culprits here. But think about all the code you aren't in control of. You might have several third-party SDKs that are hogging the user's bandwidth. For example, you might be running several marketing attribution SDKs, product analytics SDKs, error monitoring SDKs, just to name a couple of them, right? And if you can't hold them accountable, you're relying on them being good stewards in your app and promptly notifying you when there is an outage. And the truth is you need visibility into these third-party SDKs and understand what their impact is on your app so you can make the best decision to balance your business goals without compromising the user experience. And the next is, which of your screens takes the longest to load and why? Are you downloading too much data or passing too much data around your app? And doing things like optimizing image sizes, implementing better caching, and reducing heavy animations can really do wonders for speeding up your app. And next is, which key user actions are taking too long to complete? And for e-commerce customers, it's important users can dive into product details quickly, effortlessly add products to a cart, and seamlessly make a purchase. If you don't have visibility into how long users are being forced to wait at key areas, churn and loss of revenue is very possible without line of sight into even understanding the why it's happening. And what parts of your app freeze and what is the impact? Imagine you launch an app and within a minute of using it, it freezes, and then it freezes again, and then it freezes again. And maybe it's not even in an obvious area like when a large load of a large list or something like that from a product perspective is loading. And speaking from my own experience, I would quickly give up and spend my time on an app if I had to wait 20 seconds or if something was freezing over and over again, and probably switch to another app that might value my time a little more. So what does a best-in-class performance monitoring look like? So beyond failure rates, you want to know the timing of everything that's happening in your app as well. That way you have two ways of proactively addressing regressions. It's also important to understand when poor timing doesn't necessarily lead to a failure. Do you have ways of surfacing those and understanding the why it's happening? And the first bucket here is network monitoring. So e-commerce apps use a lot of third-party SDKs, right? Some of these will fail for a multitude of reasons. How do we find out about that? Do you know in real time? Do you understand what else was happening around those network calls? Are you typically waiting for an outage report? And do we understand the impact to all of our users? And from a timing perspective, because I know everyone's familiar with failures, but what about endpoints that are just slow, that don't actually fail but lead to just a bad user experience, but really at key points within your app? So if it was new users, think subscribe. If it's current users, think payments, checkouts, or even adding payment methods. What if your add to cart process took 20 seconds? Do you have a way to see how many users abandoned their carts? And an example here, we had a customer of ours. They came to us because the median time to complete a hotel booking was taking 20 plus seconds. And they were losing a large number of users that would just not complete the booking. So they understood the what was happening, but really didn't have visibility into the why. They were able to optimize that purchase flow to a median time of 5 seconds and immediately saw an increase of 3% of bookings. All right. And next is key user action monitoring. So for failures, for incomplete purchases, can you pinpoint, and again, specific maybe connectivity or other specific variables that are causing UI elements to be broken? And are you proactively alerted on these? And for timing, likewise, if your purchase endpoints are really slow, users may background the app and assume the purchase failed, and then go and complete the purchase on your website. This app's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to everybody at one point, but that leads to duplicate purchases and typically a flood of complaints and frustrated users. And the third is freeze, right? So for failures, most companies are only looking at session ending freezes, such as ANRs, right? These can happen on any screen, right? So not just a purchase screen. So if you don't have a way to easily understand where specific sections of your app are failing, then you can't proactively optimize that user flow. And then for timing, however, shorter lived freezes throughout the sessions, they typically lead to far more drop off than your mobile team, that your mobile team could be blind to. So some questions. Do you know what percentage of users stick around after multiple 3-second freezes? Do we know where in the app the 3-second freezes occur? And so you really want to know everywhere it's freezing and for how long. And then think to yourself, would you wait that long? All right, metric 2 is stability. And so what is causing your app crashes and errors? So this could be specific areas within the app or issues stemming from the interaction of device, OS, app version, and connectivity variables. The toughest crashes to solve involve clashes with the limited resources of mobile devices. And what is your app struggling with where is your app struggling with excessive memory usage? E-commerce apps frequently have out-of-memory crashes at a much higher rate than other crashes. The combination of wanting to highlight products with heavy assets like images and videos means mobile teams must carefully optimize these assets when serving them from mobile apps. Key events like Black Friday will have a huge change in your app, including new features, promotions, and it's vital to know where these changes will impact the user experiences. And where is your app resulting in freezes and ANRs? Things like heavy animations, slow or broken web views, blocking network calls can freeze the screen and prevent users from making purchases. And long freezes will result in ANRs that feel the same as a crash to the user. So while your team is monitoring these types of technical failures, they might not have the right level of visibility to easily get to the root cause. And we'll dive into more of that a little bit later, but first, I want to take a look at the third metric, which is user outcomes. So performance and stability are typical ways that folks monitor an app, but focus on user outcomes is something that is a bit different and unique. And most e-commerce companies are realizing the value of uncovering frustration signals by how users interact within their app. Customers are looking for a more reliable way of tracking user patterns by seeing where drops, abandon, and kills of the app are happening. So again, just a couple questions to think about here. How often do users abandon a key area within your app because they got tired of waiting? This is crucial, right? When you make decisions based on how users will actually perceive the app experience, you're not wasting time chasing arbitrary AppDex scores. Likewise, your app might appear to be running fast, but if users are abandoning it, you know where you should look for optimizations. And what condition cause failures that kill your conversions? You want to know why purchases are failing. Is this specific to Apple Pay? Is it specific to large carts where your backend struggles to process them? Do you have data sync issues when users are trying to buy items that are no longer available? And lastly, how can your team uncover a regression just based on user actions? What if you could get insights into why users force quit your app? Many issues that are difficult to efficiently log for can be uncovered when you have full visibility into every user experience. You can have higher level patterns like spikes in user terminations on certain screens and quickly dive into see where slowness and freezes have materialized. Now, we will demonstrate this type of visibility a little later on when we have a brief demo. But this is a key area of mobile observability. When you monitor known signals like errors and crashes, you're limited to just solving those. If you want a proactive way to address any unknown issue, then you need a way to extrapolate from what the users tell you within their actions. All right, here is our the next area for us to look at, and it's how to spot where your app falls short compared to key industry performance benchmarks. It's very important to understand how your mobile app performs compared to your competition. Failure to know where your app is lagging behind is a recipe for users to jump ship in favor of better app experiences elsewhere. In this section, we'll highlight some key performance benchmarks that your mobile team should be targeting. Now, keep in mind, these benchmarks are calculated from the median rates from Embrace's e-commerce customers. Now, we work with a lot of different companies and verticals, and we have these metrics for those different types of verticals. And if you are curious, please feel free to reach out and we can share those with you, such as financial services, hospitality, and so on. And this is kind of a cruel joke that my team will give a Bostonian a slide where he has to say benchmarks multiple times. So I apologize if my Boston accent comes out here, but you've been warned. So let's start with crash-free session rate. Now, crash-free sessions represent the percentage of all user sessions that do not experience a crash. It's a high bar, with most mature e-commerce apps exceeding 99.9% crash-free session rates. Now, Android is slightly lower, which is to be expected given the sheer number of device types needed to support on Android. And that many of them vary greatly in systems like processing power and memory, etc. We're seeing many companies getting to 99.95% and pushing for 99.99%. Since crashes are the most jarring experiences that users can experience, it's crucial that we prioritize eliminating them. After all, 84% of users abandon an app after seeing only 2 crashes. Next is low memory session rate, which this rate represents the percentage of sessions that trigger a low memory warning. While these sessions don't necessarily result in an out-of-memory crash, they are an indicator that your app is exceeding the strict memory limits of the platform. By making sure your app stays within memory limits, you can prevent user impacting issues like OOMs, freezes, and slowdowns. You can see that these numbers are higher than it would be for a fatal type like a crash. And again, the Android rate of 13.03% is much higher than that of iOS, given the variety of device types and OSs there. So make sure you monitor this metric and investigate spikes in case new app versions introduced possible memory leaks or poor memory management. All right, now our OOM-free session rate. Now we just covered low memory, and if those are left unintended, they typically lead to a spike in OOM crashes. And it's interesting, when customers first start working with us, their OOM rate is usually an order of magnitude higher because you have relatively little diagnostic information to solve OOMs because the app is terminated by the OS and it doesn't leave a stack trace. Our customers are able to heavily reduce the amount of OOM crashes because of Embrace's ability to surface these errors. If you have a lower OOM-free session rate, chances are you don't have the appropriate visibility, and we can help. We can bubble up where these are actually occurring so you can pinpoint which screens they are occurring in, as well as the distribution across all of your devices and OSs. And again, one of the most frequent causes of OOMs that we see is loading too many unoptimized assets like images. All right, now we're going to switch over to our ANRs. ANR exit occur when the app goes into a prolonged state of non-responsiveness before the user is greeted with a termination dialog. In other words, the app freezes, preventing the user from interacting, and the user decides to terminate the session. These are only measured on Android and can be very difficult to solve. Any number of things can cause ANRs, including heavy animations, blocking network calls, expansive UI updates, third-party SDKs blocking the main thread. And as everyone knows, there's a lot of other reasons there. ANRs are important because to reduce, they are important to reduce because your users cannot view products, they can't add items to carts, and obviously they cannot make purchases if the app is frozen. All right, now we have the 1 second free session rate. Now this represents the percentage of sessions where the app is frozen for at least 1 second. And again, notice how much lower this metric is than the previous ANR exit metric. Many mobile teams lack visibility into where their app freezes, including perpetual short-lived freezes throughout their sessions. And again, speaking from experience, nothing frustrates users more than waiting for every interaction to complete. So it's really important to understand both where these freezes are happening and how often, so you can track drop-off related to their frustration. All right, now here's our summary of key performance benchmarks. So again, these are high-level metrics, and they were calculated from the median rates from e-commerce customers of Embrace. As such, if your app does not meet these rates, or do not have visibility to measure these rates, you should consider whether your mobile team might lack some crucial context to deliver the best user experience to your customers. How to leverage complete mobile data sets to answer any business question. So far in this webinar, we've covered some common monitoring gaps that e-commerce companies run into. We've also touched on 3 types of metrics you need to proactively address issues, namely performance, stability, and user outcomes. Now, before I jump into a demo to show you how Embrace can help optimize e-commerce apps, I want to cover 2 more slides pretty quickly, just to give you some context into Embrace. All right, so here is a very quick intro. All right, now we're a mobile observability and analytics platform that drives optimal business decisions. And we're able to do that because we collect 100% of the data from 100% of the user sessions. And a majority of what we capture is out of the box, so there's very little instrumentation and very little maintenance needed. And because we capture all that data, it allows us to track metrics and create dashboards that people and teams actually care about and that can drive business decisions. Also, having that data allows us to create proactive alerting that are no longer looked at as white noise or annoyances that just go to one mailbox and everyone has to go in there and kind of look through them. They can be purpose built and sent to individuals and teams that would care about those. And again, they become calls to action rather than kind of white noise. And monitoring full user experiences opens up powerful debugging possibilities. So we talked a lot about event-based monitoring and the gaps that exist there. And event-based monitoring tools typically only give you sample data, which doesn't give you a full picture of everything that could be happening across your user base. They require you to log for known issues. And if you need additional context or add a new screen, you need to log for those as well and maintain those logs. What we also see is that they typically weren't purpose-built for mobile teams. Now, what we are about to see in Embrace is that we collect 100% of sessions from 100% of your users, giving you complete visibility into technical and behavioral data. The ability to look at a single user and have context around known and unknown issues to help you solve high-value issues. And we are a mobile-first and a mobile-only company. Okay, it's time for a demo, so I'm going to stop this presentation for a minute, and I'm going to actually hop into the Embrace platform. All right. As you can see, this is where we can capture our sessions. As you can see over here on the left-hand side, I'm in the sessions bucket. One thing you'll notice is it's a very intuitive and easy to use tool. And here is where we can see, again, every user from every session. And now I have this filtered by the last 1 hour. So again, there are other competitors out there that might take a little bit more time for them to surface information to you. But we can look over the last hour all the way to the 14 days, as well as a custom way to look from a timing perspective. We also are able to create filters. So again, all of these filters come out of the box, and everything I'm going to be showing you comes out of the box unless I say otherwise. But there's a whole host of ways that we can filter our specific user set. So if you want to slice and dice your data in specific ways and view that data in specific ways, we're able to do that. And everything that I'm going to be showing you here, we can aggregate and roll up into dashboards, giving you full visibility, which we're going to get to at the very end. Our user sessions here, again, we'll have some information as far as the date, the time, the app, the device, the OS, as well as any issues that this particular user may have run into. As you can see, we have crashes, if a user terminated the app, OOMs, ANRs, if there are any error logs associated with this particular session, any network errors, if they were part of a bad moment, and of course, low memory warnings. All right, so there's a lot of information here that we're able to surface. Now I want to run through a scenario. If a user calls and complains, how do we figure out, how do we surface that user? All right, now we won't get a username, we don't capture any kind of PII, but we typically associate a user name with a user ID. So we're able to essentially copy and paste a user ID, which is anonymized, and search for that user. And as you can see, it's up here still, and it will show me all of those user sessions. Now I have it broken down by an hour, because let's say they just called and said, hey, my app froze and broke an hour ago, or it broke 2 days ago. So we can look at the 48 hours and see a much more robust listing of errors and sessions. And we can assume, let's say, hey, on October 13th at 6:54 is when my app crashed, right? So we can actually find that session, and then we can open it up. And so here's where we have this particular user's session, all right? So anywhere where you see purple is when the app has been in the foreground. And you can see on the left-hand side that it was in the foreground for 1 minute and 56 seconds. And then this little sliver here is when the app has been backgrounded. And then this other one is when the app is back in the foreground. And as you can see, there's a flag there indicating that there is an actual error. All right. So I'll continue to scroll down here, but we also have selected session details. And again, all of this information is captured out of the box. So it's the OS version, it's the duration of this particular session. And again, all of the issues that we saw on that front page will also be here as well. All right. So here's where we can think of things that are not out of the box, right? Custom session properties. So if there are things that you want to slice and dice your data set in a specific way, if you want a dashboard, not just on the metrics that we have available, but on something custom, you're able to create those as well. All right. And now here is our session timeline. So I'll kind of open this up so we can see all the activities that are representative for this particular user. And now you may be used to an individual event, but this shows everything that has happened throughout the moment of the app in chronological order, as well as the timing of each event. And this is really a visual snapshot of the timeline details that we're going to get to in just a moment. But as you can see, I can kind of hover over some of these and it will show the time, it will show the views, it will show the network calls, and it's also interactive. So you can actually click on anywhere within this visual and it will bring you directly into the area of the timeline details where it's representative. All right. I'm going to scroll down here because now we see everything. And again, I come in from almost like accounting and finance background, but I view this as like an audit trail. Basically everything that happened with this particular session. And again, the connectivity, any views, and all the network calls that may have been associated with this particular user. Now I'm going to scroll down a little bit here because I want to get to a handled exception error that we ran into, which is right here. All right. So again, we're going to have a stack trace, which is great. But if you just get a stack trace, that typically isn't enough to help solve a problem. But if I scroll up, we can see, again, essentially an audit trail of how what this user was doing, where they were tapping, the views that they were entering and any activities, again, views and any fragments that might be associated with this, a particular moment or workflow that they were part of. We see, again, a breadcrumb, which, again, that's not something out of the box, but things that we can interject into the string, into the code that would be representative within our timeline here that would annotate your session at an even more granular level. And again, we also have failed network calls, all right? So again, just helping and giving context into really the technical truth of what caused the crash. And as you can see over here on the right-hand side, we can see this See Impact button. So If we ever wanted to understand what other users were affected by this particular third-party failing network call, all we need to do is click this See Impact, and it would show us that information. All right. So when I think about solving an issue and having a stack trace, again, to reproduce this, if you think about all the information we saw at the top, we have the device information, the OS. So we have the appropriate device information, as well as a true path that we can start with a tap that would lead to a particular issue. In this case, it was unhandled exception. So when we go to reproduce this, it really gives you all the information, contextual information that you would need to solve and reproduce this quickly. All right. So I'm going to zoom back out for a second because that was just a scenario I wanted to show you. But now I want to really focus on performance. And we do that by having what we call moments. All right. Now, if we want to know how users react to key parts of the app, we can see user outcomes at high value flows and be able to track how quickly users were able to complete something like checkout or add to cart. And also how long it took, what the median duration of that particular moment took those users, right? But we also give the ability to track incomplete moments, meaning the user left the moment and never completed it because there was a crash, the app stalled, or they just abandoned the app altogether. And with this information and corresponding with the technical failures and leveraging all this gives us powerful insights that would point us toward the root cause of an issue. Now, I'm going to click into one of these incomplete moments here because I want to show you some additional information. And again, when you think about failures and timings, this is kind of the failures part, right? Where we can, again, look into each of these buckets here, and we'll give you a little idea of, if you don't know what stalled means, we'll give you a little help tip here. Or if a user abandoned, again, we can click that and it will filter all of my sessions below. And so it's really great that it actually will show you all of those users that like flow into these particular buckets. So then we can start to look for commonalities across my users, right? We can see if a lot of them had bad network calls, if they had bad moments, and if maybe there was low memory warnings that were associated with it. So we can really start to dive into those buckets of users that had a bad or failed experience. Now, on the other side, we also have the complete. I think it's interesting to know for a completed moment, not all completed moments are necessarily a good thing, right? We also are really good at surfacing the bad things that kind of parade as good, meaning that these users in this bucket here that I'm hovered over took 15 seconds to complete this add to cart moment. So we also can surface the things that led, from a timing perspective, that led to not a great user experience. So think of these and think if you would wait 15 plus seconds to add an item to a cart, or would you wait 15 plus seconds to subscribe to an app in the first place? So we're really good at being able to surface this as well. And again, this is information that we can roll up to dashboards. We can create those dynamic alerts on to make sure that if the median duration for this add to cart goes over 3 seconds, that we can be alerted on it very quickly so that we don't get users into these lower buckets and taking a heck of a lot of time, all right? Now, everything I just showed you, every metric, every issue, every device, we can roll up and give to you and present to you in our dashboards. Now, we do give 2 dashboards out of the box, but these are extremely easy to create. You create them within the UI, similar to alerts. They take about 2 minutes to create these, and we offer some guidance and some help with creating these as well. But for these, you know, anything that you can think of that you'd want to create and have visibility for, you can. Because we're not a license-based, we typically invite a lot of folks in here to give management views, but we also give user-specific views for, again, things that each user or team would care about. And we are a data platform, right? Going through this, but you being able to track essentially any KPI or performance metric, performance of specific features, Again, do you have a new product line or promotion that you want to track? How many users actually clicked on that particular promotion? Daily active users, crash-free sessions, just from an app health perspective. Median time spent in the app, and again, with Black Friday coming up, we typically would like to see this spike. And if I hover over any of these, you'll be able to see that there's multiple versions that you can see. So you can actually see a version over version compare on each of our dashboards. Knowing the add to cart abandon percentage, as we just kind of looked at in the moments, but having a roll up and seeing them at a very high level too from a dashboard perspective, I think is also extremely helpful. Add to cart abandon, and of course purchase abandon. So we have a really close eye on those key workflows that really would matter and potentially drive revenue and drive conversions. All right, so I wish I could demo all day to you all, but I'm a little restricted on time. So I'm going to come back into my slide deck and start to wrap up a little bit here. So some key takeaways. You need mobile observability, not just error monitoring, to surface the largest revenue impacting issues. Now, we've shown you how to monitor at the user session level, which opens up a wider range of issue types that could be costing you users and ultimately revenue that most companies are currently blind to. And next, it's important to monitor performance, stability, and user outcome metrics to proactively address every type of regression. The more types of signals you have at key areas within your app, the better equipped you are to respond to business impacting regressions. And next is to remain competitive. You must hit key industry performance benchmarks. If you don't know what your users expect from your app, how will you know if you are meeting their expectations? And lastly, making an informed business decision requires having complete mobile data sets. When you see and know the full picture, you're much more enabled to make more informed business decisions and to eliminate the guesswork. At Embrace, we take a mobile-first approach and understand that to solve any issue, you need the complete technical details of every user's experience. Unlike traditional monitoring approaches, where you need to predict which issues will happen, Embrace collects complete data sets out of the box, which means you can find errors you didn't and couldn't know about in advance. With Embrace, if something goes wrong in your app, knowing the impact and root cause is only a click away.